Let's imagine for a moment that we've all decided to visit the largest pyramid in the world by mass. We board a plane, we arrive at our destination, and we climb. Standing atop that pyramid summit, what would you see? Desert sands or the Nile? Let me tell you what I would see. A lush landscape dotted with milpas, agricultural fields that have been continuously cultivated for over 3,000 years, because we're not in Egypt, we're in Cholula, in the Mexican state of Puebla. Today, I invite you to join me on a historical journey to ancient Mexico, where together we'll learn how this little town survived multiple invasions, conquests, and new religions to become the oldest continuously inhabited city in the Americas. Now, that's quite a feat, and if you're anything like me, before I became a historian, I didn't know much about Mexico or its past. In fact, growing up in Arizona, I was actually deeply ashamed of my Mexican heritage. And despite living in a bilingual household, I refused to speak that language. But that all changed when I began to study Mexican history, and especially after living in Cholula for a year, where I finally mastered Spanish at the age of 30. Cholula is really a wonderful place because with its Great Pyramid, it has thousands of years of culture built right on top of each other. With each conquest, the pyramid would receive another layer, an extension of its ceremonial complex. In the same way, each time the Mexican people experienced an invasion, conquest, or new religion, they added yet another layer to their already rich cultural foundation, extending their intellectual, architectural, artistic, political, and spiritual traditions. I didn't know that. I also didn't know that this, what appears to be an unassuming mound of earth with a church on top, this pyramid has been an active place of worship for 2,500 years. Clearly, this pyramid represents resilience. So are you ready to go on this historical journey? Okay, so I'm going to ask you to place yourself at the top of the pyramid, gazing out over the valley so we can watch this history unfold. And we're going to go back 3,200 years when the small lake that once occupied this site began to recede, leaving behind nutrient-rich lands that lured the first inhabitants to this location. Though we do not know their language or even the name that they gave to their new home, we do know they were dedicated agriculturalists who produced crude pottery and prospered for the next 1,000 years. Now imagine gazing out and seeing fields bursting with color, pottery being sold in the marketplace, and the hustle and bustle of long-distance traders. It's quite an inviting scene. While this scene would lure the first conquerors, the Olmeca Xicalonca people who arrived here around 200 BC to quickly conquer and dominate the region for the next 1,200 years. We don't know much about these people or the details of their daily life, but we do know they advanced the practice of pottery making and became renowned as powerful merchants, influenced, no doubt, by their location along an ancient trade route linking the Valley of Mexico with the Gulf Coast. It was the Olmeca Xicalonca people who laid the foundations for this pyramid beneath our feet. This monumental limestone and adobe structure was only possible because Cholula had access to a substantial labor force and a sophisticated hierarchical system in place to oversee the construction. The feat becomes even more impressive when you consider that Cholula's ancient engineers, architects, and artists did not have the benefit of draft animals or the wheel, simply their own intellectual ingenuity. Built in 4 stages over 1,500 years, this pyramid consists of several superimposed pyramids, as well as several ceremonial plazas, platforms, and ritual altars. One of those plazas, the Patio of the Altars, was designed for acoustic effect. Worshippers would gather here with ancient instruments to sing, dance, and chant. Today, tour guides instruct visitors to stand in the center of the patio and clap their hands and hear what sounds like a flock of birds passing overhead. This design ensured that even the smallest gathering of worshipers would produce an effective sound. If you were to stand in the Patio of the Altars in those early days, you would have been impressed with its vibrancy. Colorful murals would have decorated the interior and exterior walls, further evidence of the layering of Mexico's intellectual and artistic traditions onto the pyramid itself. One such mural, known as the Drinkers, represents over 100 individuals seated in pairs sharing a vessel of pulque, an ancient fermented drink made from the maguey cactus. Given its design and its theme, it is one of the most important murals in Mesoamerica. Now, scholars who have studied this piece carefully have all come to the same conclusion, that all the individuals depicted are intoxicated. One scholar even claims this is the oldest known depiction of the ritual of the pulque gods. It is, in essence, a drinking party. But didn't also the ancient Greeks have similar symposia? So this unassuming mound of earth in front of us, the ancient peoples would have considered it a man-made mountain. In Nahuatl, a Tlachualtepetl. Though you can't see it, it was situated directly over a spring because springs served as portals to the underworld and allowed communication with the divine. This, then, pyramid was an archetype, if you will, and it ensured Cholula's longevity. With its base of over 400 meters per side, it remains the largest pyramid in the world by mass, which of course is why we've come to see it. Visitors today can explore its interior thanks to tunnels that were excavated in the early 20th century, or they can learn more about it in a small regional museum built at its base, housed in a former insane asylum. Now, if you focus, you can almost hear the sounds of ritual at the sacred Tlachualtepetl and the cacophony of voices of merchants and migrants passing to and fro in the marketplace. Amidst this hustle and bustle arrived the Tolteca Chichimeca people in the 12th century, the second set of conquerors. They would dominate the region for 350 years, and it is from them that we have the place name of Cholula, Tolan Chololan, place of those who fled, or the fleeing place, since the story goes they were exiles from their ancestral home in Tolan. Now imagine standing here at the Tlachualtepetl and watching the Tolteca Chichimeca conquerors hold a termination ritual to sever its link with the divine, slashing several altar stones to symbolize the pyramid's brokenness and to prevent its future use as a holy site. This act would have been essential in Mesoamerican culture because the image of a destroyed temple symbolized conquest. All but abandoned, the Tlachualtepetl would fall into ruin and soon become abandoned, this Cholula's symbol of political and spiritual power. The Tolteca Chichimeca conquerors would have dedicated themselves to asserting their political and spiritual dominance. They would have shifted the entire site slightly northwest and rebuilt it around a massive new teocalli, or god house, dedicated to Quetzalcoatl, the plumed serpent, whom they instituted as the new patron deity, a new ceremonial complex, and a new god. Even so, ritual to the rain god and ceremonial burials continued at the Tlachualtepetl, adding yet another layer to its long sacred history. Now, at this point, Cholula would surpass its former glory. It would boast between 30 to 50,000 residents. It would have produced important pottery, and long-distance merchants would have come to its marketplaces. The Quetzalcoatl sanctuary would have become more popular than the Tlachualtepetl had ever been. Regional leaders would come to consult with the Quetzalcoatl priests in matters of spiritual and political importance. And aspiring leaders would not even assume authority in their home polities until after they had attended a legitimation ritual at the Quetzalcoatl sanctuary. Cholula was at the height of its power when its residents heard whispers of foreigners who had landed on the coast and were marching inland. It is a cool October night in October 1519, and if we can almost envision Cortés and his men camped in a dry riverbed outside of Cholula, waiting for first light. Dawn would break, and he and his indigenous and European allies would invade Cholula, but because sources differ, we don't know exactly what transpired. But what we do know is that they massacred thousands of Choluteca, men, women, and children, either because they were afraid of an ambush or as a show of military power. Days later, they would leave Cholula broken and burned, its Quetzalcoatl temple, the symbol of its political and spiritual power, in shambles. Like the Tolteca Chichimeca before them, the Iberians would dedicate themselves to appropriating and reordering Cholula's sacred space, first by renaming the site San Pedro Cholula after St. Peter, its new patron saint, replacing Quetzalcoatl. When foreign priests came to preach Christianity, they were startled with the enthusiasm with which the native people constructed a massive new church on the former site of the Quetzalcoatl sanctuary using the very same stones. For the Choluteca, this church was an archetype of the pre-conquest temple. It symbolized their corporate identity, but more important for a sacred site like this, it allowed them to continue their regional spiritual dominance, albeit as a Christian city. In many ways, when the friars established a center of learning, next to the church, it was merely a continuation of Cholula's long and deep intellectual tradition. The Christian appropriation would culminate with the building of a little church on top of the pyramid dedicated to Our Lady of the Remedies, a Spanish virgin, which would then add another layer and another religion to Cholula's pyramid. The indigenous Christianity that developed is best exemplified today in the Procession of the Lanterns, which takes place every August 31st, and in which I've participated a few times. This ritual begins by taking the Virgin down from her perch atop the pyramid and putting her into the Church of San Gabriel for a week. Then with blasts of live music, with homemade altars, with firecrackers, and while carrying their patron saints on platforms, the Choluteca will accompany the Virgin back up to the top of the pyramid. Along the way, they will pass by those milpas, those ancient agricultural fields that have been continuously cultivated for 3,000 years. These very same milpas that had witnessed hundreds of years ago similar processions led by the Quetzalcoatl priests cradling their divine images. This layering of Cholula's temple continues even today. Just a few months ago, at the end of 2016, amidst loud local protests, the city laid the latest extension to Cholula's pyramid, a parking lot. In order to attract tourists, the city bulldozed over those ancient milpas, those agricultural fields growing at the base of the Tlachihualtepet, and replaced them with fields for soccer and track, laying the foundations for a modern mall. This, then, is the newest conquest, the new sacred, the latest invasion, and economic dependence on foreigners. So we've come to the end of our 3,200-year historical journey, and together we've witnessed how Cholula survived invasions, conquests, and new religions to become the oldest continuously inhabited city in the Americas. Now, I should add here that certain scholars dispute this chronology and believe that Cholula was abandoned for a time. But even if this were true, Cholula remains impressive for its thousands of years of culture built right on top of each other. And like Cholula, Mexico accumulated its deep intellectual, architectural, artistic, political, and spiritual traditions across millennia. But we wonder, what should this mean to us? Well, to me, it means that I had no reason to be ashamed of my Mexican heritage. This is my history, and today my husband and I are raising our children in a bilingual household to be proud of their background. But I mentioned at the beginning of this talk that this pyramid represents resilience. It is Mexico's legacy to us, and it sort of forces us to ask the question, what will our legacy be to future generations? Thank you.